What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the latest installment of the Nerd Kitchen. I am Craig Stonehaw, your host, here on behalf of Laughing Rock Technology, and today we are talking about one of the most dreaded words in business, which is compliancy. Now, if you're at a large organization and you're a compliancy officer, I'm not knocking your industry. It's definitely a net positive, in my opinion, but for definitely small and mid-sized businesses, compliancy has brought on a whole new set of challenges, and really just in the last 6 years or so has this really started to come up. And the reason why is we've seen a lot more infiltrations, we've seen a lot more data breaches, we've seen a lot more security issues, especially at the small mid-sized level. And organizations, insurance companies, even just partner affiliates want to make sure that if they're going to work with you, their data's safe, your data's safe, and that as a team, you're not going to be the next victim of some, flash in the pan horrible story on Twitter. So let's talk a little bit about the types of compliancy. I don't want to get too nerdy on this. I know it's the Nerd Kitchen, but I don't want to delve too deep into all the different compliancies. Anybody that's touched on this before knows it gets pretty weird. But there are a few that are the main ones. I mean, we've all heard of HIPAA. Now, HIPAA pretty much only deals with the healthcare industry. The big thing we want to talk about on HIPAA before we move on is that HIPAA is not really a technology compliancy as much as some of the other compliancy formats that you're going to find. I think only 40% of HIPAA is even related to technology. HIPAA is a monster. I mean, this thing's covering how far away from your files fire extinguishers have to be, who holds the keys to your filing cabinets, what doors in your office need to be locked. There are so many regulations with HIPAA that we could do a whole hour-long episode just on that. But be aware, if you're not in healthcare, you don't need to worry about it. Moving on, we got PCI. PCI is a big one. We've actually seen a decline in PCI lately. PCI DSS, I think, is the formal name. And the reason why is a lot of vertical market softwares are now being used for retention of credit card data and financial data, which is what PCI covers. And if you're keeping it on the cloud with a partner, the responsibility is off your shoulders. It really falls onto them. So people aren't really keeping credit card numbers on their network like they used to, or financial information on clients like they used to. But this one is still relevant. If you run credit card transactions, if you take financial data as a day-to-day operation, you need to be aware of PCI and hopefully have a good partner for it. GDPR, that one's pretty much only in Europe, and unless our reach really starts spreading into the European Union, I don't think I'm even going to talk about it. SOX is a big one, but that's mostly for publicly traded companies. So if you have questions on that, you can hit me on the side. GLBA, FISMA, there's a bunch of others, but there's two we're going to focus on today that touch almost every single business in the world. The first, or at least in the United States, the first is insurance compliancy, which we're seeing is going to be pretty much mandated for you to get cyber insurance moving forward. If you haven't already been hit with this compliancy, you will be. Every insurance company is requiring it. The big thing with the insurance compliancy is, although you have to pass a compliancy audit in order to get cyber insurance, they are now making cyber insurance a prerequisite for general liability, maybe for an umbrella policy, maybe for some sort of other business owner policy, something like that. As they tie these things together, it's essentially becoming mandated that you have to pass a cybersecurity evaluation prior to being able to get insurance. And you have to have insurance and able to run a business. So this is a thing that will touch on any business owner or anybody in the C-suite at any organization. The second one we want to talk about is corporate partner compliancy. Now, this probably won't hit as many organizations as insurance, definitely won't hit as many. But if you deal with large organizations, and I mean big organizations is usually where we see it, maybe like doing work for MedEd or PPL, or you're doing work for Apple or LiftMaster or some of these big organizations with broad reach. They have their own compliancy. They want to make sure that when they work with you, any data they share with you is safe, and you become an extension of them when you partner with them. Hence, they want to make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing to make sure that you're not going to end up causing a problem for everybody. So we're going to dig into that in a little bit more detail, but a couple of examples of where that might come into play. I don't know, you're a media production company and you're creating video spots for Disney or the NHL or something like that. They're going to want to make sure your data is secure because they're sharing photos, maybe promotional videos with you. Maybe they're sending scripts over. They don't want that stuff leaking out of the general population. Or maybe you're a general contractor and you bid and win a job to build a new Marriott or a series of Marriotts. And they're going to be sharing schematics and design plans and floor plans and things like that with you and your team. Well, they want to make sure that Hyatt doesn't get a hold of that stuff. So they're going to have their own questionnaire, and you're going to have to field a team that can answer these questions adequately. And I got to be honest, some of these things they get pretty aggressive. I mean, I actually spent a week one time just working on a compliancy for a large corporate organization, and that's all I did for 40 straight hours was back and forth with these guys, ironing out details, minor nuances, just little things they wanted to be 100% sure that was being done correctly. So what are they looking for? I mean, in my experience, they're kind of converging. Insurance compliancy and corporate compliancy are starting to ask pretty much the same questions, sometimes in very different ways, but they're all heading in the same direction. They want to make sure your email's secure, that you're doing spam protection, that you have phishing protection and training in place. I want to make sure you're doing intrusion prevention. I want to make sure that your remote work policies are in place, understood by your staff, and that they're enforced. User creation, deletion, retention, security policies, things like that. Password encryption and password security. They want to make sure you have policies on that. Data encryption, data access, physical access. I mean, a lot of these questionnaires are going into how do you issue and revoke key cards? If you use physical keys, how do you give them? How do you make sure they don't get duplicated? So they get pretty granular on some of these questionnaires. And it really varies from insurance company to insurance company, corporate partner to corporate partner. There is a trick to compliancy, and this is where you really need to engage a partner when dealing with high-level compliancy. And that trick is that they're not cut and dry. It seems like the type of thing that would be. It's, hey, do you encrypt your data? Yes. Okay, moving on. The problem with the current incarnation of most compliancy forms is that they're very binary. They're yes or no. You get a question. If it's yes, you pass. If it's no, you fail. If you answer no to any question, you fail the entire audit and you have to start over. The problem with this, that seems like it might be okay on the surface. The problem is not all questions are cut and dry. They're not all obvious. I mean, let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say you have a compliancy form that asks, do you encrypt your files? Very straightforward question. Unfortunately, it's not. Most of these are yes with a but, no with a maybe. So on that one, yeah, we do encrypt our files in transit. We also encrypt all connections back to data stores, but we don't encrypt our files at rest. So that question is asking, do you encrypt files? We do. Do we have every single form of encryption that you could have? No. If you check no, you fail the audit. So a lot of times context is the most important thing, and a compliancy partner's job is to justify the answer. So if you do select yes on there, you need to be documenting why you chose yes, even though you know there could be a technical reason why you could have chosen no. Another example is, do you use 2FA on all VPN connections? Well, technically the answer might be no, because you don't use VPN at all. Maybe you don't have any VPN connections, so you don't use 2FA on VPN connections. But, I mean, obviously in context, it's irrelevant to your network because 2FA is not relevant to VPN connections that don't exist. So that would be a yes, even though the answer is no. I'll give you one more. Do you encrypt all mobile devices? Well, if you don't allow mobile devices to access any of your data and you actually go out of your way to make sure that's blocked, then how would you encrypt them? So again, this would be a yes that's actually a no. Having a good solid encryption partner that can kind of walk you through this nuance, and they get pretty odd at times where you know what they're asking, but based on the way it's asked and the way you have to answer, I've written multiple paragraph explanations on answers when I do compliancy audits to make sure that whoever's reviewing it, if they ask for backup data, they know what the thought process was, and it's not going to hurt the client or hurt the process. Let's jump away from just kind of talking here and get away from the semantics of it, and let's actually look at what you can expect to see from a compliancy standpoint. So what we did here is we grabbed probably the most basic compliancy form that we could find. Now, We've done these in situations where they're 100 pages long. We've done them where they're 1 page long. So there's not a ton of consistency. This one's about 5 pages long. It's a short one. It's pretty vague in general, which is good because it'll give you an idea of what they're looking for. But not to spend too much time on this, but here, right off of that example I just gave, they're asking about VPN and multi-factor authentication. Now, this one actually does give you some NA options. Most of them do not. I actually appreciate it when they do that. A lot of times, if you choose NA, they will ask you to justify your answer. Now, this is obviously just a scan, not an online form, so that's not an option there. But multi-factor authentication, you'll see, is a big one. You see that come time and time again on these forms. Email security filtering, we talked about that earlier. This is a huge one. They want to make sure, as email is your primary form of communication for most organizations, you're doing what you need to do to keep it safe. Backing up, restoring, segregating data. Are you accepting credit card payments? And if you are you using a PCI compliant processor? So a lot of the questions on this one, I like this one because it kind of nibbles at the edge of all the major questions that we see. Now, there are compliancies, and there's a couple of insurance companies I could name just right off the top of my head, where almost all of these questions would be a section on a larger compliancy form. So they would ask, maybe if we go back up to that PCI compliancy question, based on what you choose, there might be 10, 12, 15, 20 different follow-up questions. What types of policies do you have in place? Are they written? They might even have an upload button for you to share your formal internal policies on how you handle sensitive customer financial data. Some of them just want a yes or no. They just want to check a checkbox. So that's something that you deal with it as it comes. But as we scroll down through here, this one's focused pretty heavily on ransomware. So they're going to ask a number of specific questions on ransomware. How often are you doing training? That's another one we're seeing more and more often, is they want to make sure you're training your staff on how to deal with these types of issues. Backup and recovery, I have never seen a compliancy form that does not hit backup and recovery aggressively. So if you don't have a rock solid backup recovery plan, there's literally no way to pass a compliancy in almost any format. More multi-factor questions. Here's internal security and control. This is getting bigger and bigger, and actually probably the fastest growing part of compliancy I'm seeing is they want to make sure that not just that they can scan the outside of your network and they can't get through any ports, and not just that you're scanning your email for spam, but what are you doing inside with your staff? How are you making sure that people in the sales department aren't accessing HR records, or people in the operations department aren't able to get into secure management files that are being shared between C-level executives? So how are you doing this? Are you running proper endpoint detection and response products on your network as opposed to just off-the-shelf antivirus? That's another big one that's becoming standard. In fact, last year we don't even offer antivirus anymore. We only offer EDR now because of how important it is for compliancy for our clients. So you'll see it's a lot of the same stuff here. Here's some encryption stuff. We talked about that in the examples. If I can leave you with just a couple of thoughts here, when it comes to compliancy, there is no one-size-fits-all. Based on your industry, based on what it is that you do, based on who you work with, and based on how your workflow operates, your answers and your questions that you get can be very, very different from everyone else. It is one of the most personalized IT experiences that you can have that is not personalized. You can do your own IT compliancy audit. This is one of the few where I will strongly recommend that you don't. It is extremely important to have somebody who has intimate knowledge of the inner workings of your information technology complete these forms for you. If you have an internal IT person, fantastic. That's your person. If you don't, this is something that you should be working with a trusted partner on to make sure that you don't get hung up. There is a lot of liability that can come along with improperly answering one of these questionnaires. And the worst case scenario is with a partner questionnaire, if you improperly answer it, you open yourself up to lawsuits. With an insurance questionnaire, if you improperly fill this out and you have a cybersecurity event, they could just flat out refuse to cover it. And if they are doing tie-ins, if they find that you improperly answered one of these questionnaires and then you have a liability claim, maybe it has nothing to do with cybersecurity, I hope this doesn't happen. I've never seen an example, but theoretically, as they move towards tying these policies together, they could find that your form was improperly filled out, meaning your cybersecurity policy was invalidated, meaning that your liability policy is invalidated, meaning that you're on the hook for yourself. So there is a lot of risk that comes into these documents not being done correctly. So find somebody to help you make sure they get done correctly. That's it on Compliancy. I know it was a lot of fun. Everybody loves talking Compliancy. We'll be back with another episode next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.